Hello there. Today's the second day of Pinot Noir 2025 conference in Christchurch, and amongst the wines I've tasted today that's really stood out for me is Colpit's 2019 Pinot Noir. And this is referred to as Tiwha. Evidently the name is more correctly pronounced Tiwha, but it's a wine that's been named in honour of the proprietor's father, whose name was Tiwha, but his family called him Tiwha, and thus the seeming mispronunciation of this name. Colpit are a relatively small producer in the Gibbston Valley. The reason this wine has come to my attention is the fact that it's a wine that's been kept back at the cellar to be released when it reaches maturity. Evidently this vintage was the first year in which the vineyards were in conversion to organic, so it's not completely organic, but that year would have been the first year when all the vineyards practices were entirely organic. The grapes were handpicked on the estate's vineyards on Colpit Road, which is between the main road through the Gibbston Valley and the Gibbston back road there. Evidently about 30% of the fruit was fermented as whole bunches, meaning the stems of that proportion of the bunches stayed in the ferment, and that should give a little bit more structure, a little bit more grip, and some people believe sort of a funky complexity to the character. The wine aged for 10 months in oak. The barrels used were French oak, and of that about 30% were new. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? My first impression is that actually this is relatively deep and dark for a New Zealand Pinot Noir. That's often the case with wines from Central Otago. Having said that, I mean, it's still only a medium depth. I can see through it relatively easy. It's that dark blackish ruby that stands out there. The wine is labelled as having 13.5% alcohol and seems to be quite readily throwing some tears onto the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are rich and lifted. There's a really intense, dark, ripe, black plum note. There are also some balsamic hints, which demonstrates the time the wine has spent aging in the bottle. But then these aromas are followed by notes of licorice and raisins, ripe, dark fruit. So let's for taste. On the palate there's a purity and an elegance. There's lovely fresh acidity, and that's combining with some very fine, almost powdery tannins to give a lovely mouth-watering interplay. The alcohol isn't particularly intruding onto the wine, and it's allowing the freshness of the fruit to continue through to the finish. There is a core of this dark, ripe, almost sort of cooked plum through to prune note in the mid-palate, but actually there's not quite the weight of earthy richness that you'll get from some of the bigger Central Otago Pinots. And for me, that can be a characteristic of wines from Gibbston. They are that little bit lighter, that little bit more elegant, while actually still retaining a fine structure. The flavours really are lasting very nicely. It's the freshness of that black plum fruit, a hint of prune, then that's followed by grip that's coming from tannins that are velvety, cedary, and in an attractive way, just a tiny touch dusty. It's great to see high quality New Zealand Pinot Noirs like this being given time to age in bottle so that you can see their potential for development. Having said that, this is released in tiny quantities. It's not particularly cheap. Having said that, given its quality, if you start to compare this sort of quality to the wines of Burgundy, very quickly it becomes apparent that this is great value for money wine. It's opulent, it's appealing. There's something about the richness, the juiciness and the generosity of texture that makes me think of wines from Vaughan Romney. This is a wine that's really stood out for me, and I feel quite privileged to try it. So thank you for joining us for this tasting. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, do please sign up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It would be fantastic to have your support there. And that way you can also set yourself an alert and you can be notified every time we release a new tasting. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on to them. That would be fantastic. I will of course leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and that way you can follow that and you can see if it's available near you, if not what other vintages might be, what its pricing is, and there's a whole host of other information there to help you make an informed buying decision about this wine. If you have any comments, please pop them in the box below. We'd really love to hear from you about what you think about the wines, the tastings, or anything else related to that. Most importantly though, I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Until then, bye for now.